Howdy, howdy, howdy. How
Hey,
is everybody doing today? Welcome to the Crow's Nest, Tuesday, March 30th at 5 p.m. Central. I see lots of people on. Jason has joined me yet again. I thank Jason for continuing to help me co-host this and not just abandon me on the side of the road. I thank you again.
that's right.
And
Check is in the mail,
today,
right?
it's been in the mail for a while. I can't believe you haven't got it yet. So must be something wrong with
I
Postal
just
Service.
haven't. It is.
Now,
There's something wrong with Postal Service.
it is the one and only, the Derek Schubert experience we're incorporating today, right? The music plays. It might not be the right music for this, the Derek Schubert experience. I don't know what it would be, but and today we're going to be painting out of focus dragon. That's what it looks like. So I got to work on that a little bit. Because I'm not going to hold it all the way there the whole time. But welcome, Derek. How are you doing today?
Thanks. I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing great, and I love, 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 love the shelf of excellence behind you. The shelf of, I am a badass dude, and here's my badassness, right?
I need to keep reminding myself, keep pinching myself that the silver and gold trophies are real. There they are on the wall.
Yeah, no bronze for you, just silver or gold.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good.
3 minutes into the show, and there's 2 requests for dancing. One, though, specifically for Pooh's rerun.
Oh, a rerun off. I think that has to
I
be.
appreciate the fandom. I think it's my Zoom camera setup here is not set up for the full body spectacle
Hmm,
that
Oh.
the
He,
rerun
he
dance
could have
would
just
require.
gone with an injury. He should have just pled an injury,
yeah.
and we wouldn't have had to, disbelieve the whole
Ah,
thing.
painted Charlie horse. Ah.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I heard.
Uh, uh, uh,
What is he doing?
there we go. That's better.
He's
Focusing.
making out of focus dragon into in focus dragon.
Yeah, so this is today I'm going to be picking up yet again the Julie Guthrie, and they are on watching today, fortunately, um, the Dragon Bust from the last Kickstarter, which, spoiler alert, um, Justin said they are expecting inbound containers. What day, Justin?
Thursday, but we're not entirely certain. It might just be completely restock.
Okay.
Yeah, we weren't
So-
supposed to mention that, remember? Remember, he said, don't tell anybody this. But,
Oh, did he? Oh well, see,
Yeah.
that's why you can't tell
You
me
didn't hear
anything
that
right
part?
before the show.
But in all reality,
Third.
it's likely
Yeah.
restock. So
Oh,
no hopes up, folks. Sorry.
Well, there's nobody's really watching anyway, so it's not like it's going to go anywhere. We just have our little core group of people. So I see Rhonda's on, Jean's on, Greg Zuniga's on, Darth Abacus Bot is on, Samurai Jack is on, Valandar
Oh,
the
that's
Red
comforting.
is on. So
Wait, are we getting
Boss are
bots
taking
to
over
boost our
everything.
numbers?
yes. Yes. If
they
you look at
also
our
post
viewership
links
number,
for us.
a good 2/3 is bots right now. Yeah. So, Derek,
Aaron
What have you
jumped
been
in.
up to
Bruce
today?
jumped in.
Bryce is on too. Oh, Tease, Bryce Coconor
Tease?
next week. Yeah, next week.
Oh,
Next week we got Bryce, his special guest. I told you that, I think.
I got a text, but you said it was someone named Bruce.
Did it autocorrect?
If you want to call him Bruce the whole time next week, let's do that. Let's just call him Bruce.
That's
He's
not going to be any
know.
good, though. We need to call him Bryce.
Oh, okay.
Well, you could just
if you-
call him Bryce. Welcome him down here to Australia. Can we call you Bryce?
There you go.
Well, we have the incomparable Derek Schubert on, who is a skinker, well known, well respected. By skinker, I mean that as a sculptor and a painter. I don't want anybody that doesn't know that breakdown to take it another direction. That wouldn't be appropriate. But we're going to focus a little bit more on the painter side of the skinker, the inkter, the painter side of that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Derek and his use of textures in a very subtle and implied way.
As a painter, though, not as a sculptor.
Yes, and there was a little bit of debate and a little bit of hostilities prior to the show coming on about painters not honoring the smooth surfaces that sculptors put into the piece.
Yeah,
right?
I'm still
Is that
shook.
kind of the gist
I'm
of it?
still shook about
You're
the
shook
whole
by it.
thing.
So when you sculpt a smooth surface, your full expectation as a painter that we honor that smooth surface and paint it smooth.
No, I think you're putting words into my mouth now.
But one of the things, and I asked Derek to be on this week, I wanted to showcase some of his style a little bit more. And one thing, Justin, if you would pop up the Undersea Chick, because we're gonna do a little more photos this time, more so than what we normally do. And Derek, you did this piece like forever ago, right?
Well, so I sculpted this one 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, and although I have painted almost everything that I've sculpted. This one, just because another painter painted the example of this one for Reaper's gallery online store, so there was already a good example, and somehow that took the pressure off of me to paint one immediately. So I didn't paint this one until just a couple months ago. So this is a very new paint job.
Oh, I was thinking of the underwater scene, the whole diorama scene
dry?
that you had done.
Yeah. It is it's non-water water. This is fake underwater. So it's
Non-water
dry but
water.
wet.
Oh, this is a new
NWW.
class. This is a new class.
This is, if you watch the commentary on the Lord of the Rings DVDs, you'll hear Peter Jackson talking about the dry for wet, how they would put Sean Astin with like a fan blowing his cloak up, and then they just photographically add like the the camera shimmer to make it look like he was underwater. So it's all
Oh.
illusion.
Oh.
It looks like he's
But this is
underwater.
you're not a but this is actual paint applied to the miniature. There's no photo editing or anything that you're implying.
That's right. No, this is
Okay.
an accurate photograph of what I painted on this figure.
All right. So Justin, zoom in on the Ray, please. Because is this Julie Guthrie Ray, right?
That's right. So
Yeah.
as you mentioned, I did a diorama with the other two sea elves that I sculpted for Reaper, and it also included Bob Rodolphi's Slythe Queen and Werner Klocke's Mermaid, and then a big coral reef that I sculpted for it. And that was about 10 years ago. That was an entry for
One of my
Gen Con's
very favorite pieces you've ever done.
Thanks.
Mine too.
Look at that.
Yeah, I
it's
remember that one
fantastic.
rather
And
vividly.
this very ray was one that I had prepped and primed to go on that diorama those 10 years ago or so. And I ran out of time. I had to catch my flight to Indianapolis, and I tossed the ray back into my box. But now it gets to see the light of day as a companion to the bard here.
Oh, wow. And
And
on
a
this,
good example of texture that wasn't sculpted, if I'm not mistaken.
well, yeah, it's texture. It's freehand. It's
Yeah.
a lot of
No,
use
it's
of
great.
colors.
I'm just
Yeah.
looking at the shading.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. What is kind of your approach when you are looking at a ray, a big smooth surface, and going to apply textures or patterns or in a way all of this is freehand and you can generalize it all down to freehand, but textures and patterns and whatnot. Do you reference photos? What's kind of your thought process when you start?
Yeah, for this one, I knew the colors that I wanted to use on the humanoid figure. And so then I did an image search online for some stingrays and manta rays, and just to see the range of colors and patterns and textures that there are on real creatures. And then since this is a fantasy creature, I can use some artistic license to change the colors, change the patterns. But there is an actual blue spotted stingray out there that you can see in the ocean. And the pattern
called
of
a
the
golden ray.
Yeah.
It's called a golden ray. Yes, I have dealt with one.
Why?
before.
If it's blue spotted?
What it's called. I didn't name it. I'm sorry. I'm not a.
Well, that's a stupid name.
I know. Well,
I'm going to start a petition to change it.
All right. Yeah.
So I found some photographs and just found ones whose colors and patterns would harmonize with this the humanoid figure. And so I chose a blue that was in the same kind of color range. And I think you also mentioned when you were talking about the things you wanted to talk about on this show, Michael, our ability to use paint to draw the viewer's attention to certain parts of the model. So on this, I exaggerated the highlights on the front of the ray because I want you to look at the front of the ray and I want to enhance the depth and sort of the motion of the ray out toward you. So that's why I used, there's more orange, there's just lighter colors, there's more contrast in the front of the ray. So I posted this on the on Reaper's forum in the show-off painting area, and one of the respondents said, "I like how the colors of the ray match the colors of the girl," and like, oh well, I didn't really intend for it to be that way. Maybe he's running away from her because he doesn't want to become her next outfit, like she's wearing ray skin.
Justin, pop back to both of them together, would you? There you go. That's cool. Yeah,
so
it
it's
does.
the same color palette.
I loved how you tied the spots into her, obviously. I think that's something that it's good to help unify various separate pieces together like they would be together. And just a little hint of color is great to do that. And did you, as you are closer, and I'm pointing the screen like you can see what I'm pointing at. It's great TV. As you focused, so the focus of the ray is the higher detail, the higher contrast, the more textures and what have you. And as you went away, I noticed that there's still textures, but it's far less exaggerated, more subtle.
Right. lower
Yeah.
contrast as it goes back to give that illusion
Right.
of depth. And I tried also to stimulate a kind of shininess to the surface there, so as if the light is coming in from like top right of this view. And so these wing-like surfaces, if they're shiny, then there's going to be a certain band along the wing where the light is going to reflect. So on the wing that's closer to us, you could see there's a glint, a sort of a sheen on the tip of the wing, and then it gets dark, and then it gets really light, and then it fades into the body. So it's that really light band where I wanted to give the illusion that there's a shiny, sort of lumpy, leathery texture to the skin of that ray.
Yeah, and
It
again,
also adds a lot
non-wet.
of... Go ahead.
Non-wet wet is the new class that Derek's going to be offering at ReaperCon this year. Make sure you get, when the classes go up, look for non-wet wet, and make sure
Non-wet
that
water.
just make non-wet water, non-wet wet, no non-wet water. He's going to name it. I mean, he can name it whatever he wants to, but make sure Derek's teaching
He
it,
probably
because if
wouldn't have
someone
picked
else,
that. I'm just guessing
Yeah.
he wouldn't have picked that. But
yeah,
that
so
was your name, Michael.
oh well, non-wet water, NWW, right?
We'll have a focus group. We'll run it through
Okay,
extensive testing of like 15 or 20 groups of people and figure out what their preferences are.
So keep an eye out for that.
Well, I
and
like
also,
the way that the shading adds motion to Julie's sculpt, which already is in motion. I mean, you really enhanced it with the way you used the contrast on it.
Yeah, and I bent the tail as well to follow the line of her leg, and I
And her
chose
hair.
this angle for photographing so that you would see those shapes interacting with one another.
it's almost like Miko running past me and I'm having to dodge because she doesn't take out my legs as she darts by. It's almost the same kind of thing here. And for
That's
those that aren't familiar
Dogs
with
are the stingrays of land, as they
and
always
those aren't
say.
familiar,
That's pretty
the
deep.
aquatic familiars pack, sculpted mostly, if not entirely, by Julie Guthrie, is fantastic. There's
I
the
think
ray,
so, yeah,
there's
I
a
think
little shark, there's a crab, there's all
eel.
kinds of really cool stuff. The eel, the moray eel, I've used it a bunch of times for various things. It's a fantastic thing. If you guys haven't seen it, pick it up. It's fun to use and do your underwater scenes and stuff. That's really cool. And I really like the quote unquote limited palette that you use too. And you tend to go that route a lot of times. I mean, I would say that your go-to is more of a limited palette. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, it's pretty muted, saturated. If I have multiple colors, it's usually in the green, orange, purple secondaries, but sometimes I use some red or some yellow or some blue.
There's a lot of
Just mix
there's a lot of hidden colors in there. It's, it reads very limited palette, but if you look in your shadows and everything, you're throwing in.
You
a lot
mentioned
more.
some colors you used on the base that aren't immediately obvious. What were those colors?
Yeah, so these were some of the colors that I had experimented with and had worked out well on that reef diorama those years ago. So it's Reaper's muted browns, wood stain brown as the dark and driftwood brown as the light. I also used on this some colors that are discontinued. I think, do we need to keep up the trend of mentioning discontinued
We have
colors?
to. We have
Yep,
to. You're
absolutely.
making me proud.
Viewers.
Exactly.
Clouded Sea and Seafoam
Sea.
Blue are some muted cyan, like blue-green colors. And,
those are great colors to tease with because they were here, they went away, they came back, they went away again. So there was a double slam there. Yeah, but go ahead.
And so I think, did I send a photograph of the close-up of the base also?
Yeah, you did.
Showing the interplay there.
Yeah.
So I had these browns and blues on my palette, and I just was sort of dabbing a little of this and a little of that, and wound up. I had like dark brown that I highlighted with a blue green, and then I highlighted that with an ivory color, and then I glazed in another dark blue and got some purple in there. So just trying to get some interest and variation, some texture on the base.
Right.
The base that comes with the figure includes the starfish, I think, and it has a
Uh-huh.
kind of rocky corally texture. But then I used some putty to build up more of this base around that figure. So like I didn't really know that I was gonna go for this particular effect. I just put these colors on my palette and um, loaded my brush and stippled here with this and stippled here with that, and then stepped back and squinted at it and saw where there were some areas where it was too stark of a transition, and I'd go over with a middle ground, or it looked too dull in that part, so I'd add a little more vibrant blue or a little yellow or orange. So just continually
Yeah.
testing and finessing it.
Yeah. Justin, would you pan back out to the entire image again, please? Yeah. It's nice, and I love the detail on the tips of the ray's wings, the little highlights on that. It really, I don't know, it helps frame and helps you bring in and helps with the curve of that well. Now, Julie added that that Familiars pack was sculpted for Bob for a birthday present back in the day. Nice little trivia that you learn, especially when the
Cool.
sculptors are actually paying attention. Now, Justin, would you zoom in on her face, please? Perfect. Now, this is really cool, and it's. I hope you guys can read this on the Twitch screen because you can see it more so in the photos. I love her headband, and what I really like about it was that contrasting color of the orange. And if you initially, when you first read it, you're like, well, he used some nice whitish bands for the freehand on the orange sculpt, and the orange gives it a nice contrast, like I said. But when you really look at it, I see those greens just very subtly coming into the bands, the white bands, and it blends in so well, and it blends in with Derek's brand new announced technique of the non-wet water. It just ties it all in together even more. I'm gonna milk this one till it's dead. It probably already is, but I really like that.
Yeah,
That was a
we'll
really
start it.
really nice touch. Yeah. That was a really nice touch.
And the orange here, well, the orange here is pretty muted on its own. It's like
Mm-hmm.
rust brown and orange brown, but because it's next to these grayed out greens and blues, even just a little bit of orange and brown really looks that much more saturated. If I had painted this with like a fire orange or a volcanic orange or something, it would overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
So like when we do non-metallic metals or just coming up with the palette for characters and creatures of all kinds, it's so much of it depends on the juxtaposition of one color with another. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
somebody says, what's your recipe for non-metallic metal gold? Well, the recipe has to depend on what the rest of the palette is, because
Right.
what
Right.
looks bright and appropriate for one figure may look garish or not strong enough on another.
Yeah.
Well, I
And I
think
noticed a
making it
little.
slightly
Go
desaturated
ahead.
like that makes it look more underwatery as well.
Right.
It does.
The
We're
It
reds
coining
and
does.
all kinds of
oranges would
terms,
just
underwatery.
they'd get washed out with the blue. When I was preparing to do that the reef diorama, I had a layover in Boston for a few hours, so I went to the aquarium there and took a lot of photographs at the New England Aquarium because they have their big
Wow.
tanks at this artificial coral reef, and I just took lots of photographs to see the shapes and colors and textures of the coral and just what happens with light as you're looking at a distance. So
Mm-hmm.
um, also on the Reaper forum, I posted this figure, and the figure had a different hair color and a different arrangement of paint on the hair. The first time I posted it, it was bluer,
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't so much of a. You can maybe see I'm squinting at the screen now. The highlighting on the hair just
Yeah.
behind the hair headband was not that pronounced, and the hair
Right.
itself looked much flatter, and the blue just didn't harmonize with the rest of it. So I went back and I glazed it more green, and I deepened the shadows, and I highlighted those strands that are closer to the headband. just like I said with the ray, the stronger contrast and the lighter colors there of those hair strands pull them forward, while the darker shadows pull back the rest of the hair. So it gives the illusion of even more depth to this hairstyle than is really sculpted on the figure.
Am I seeing purples in some of the shadows of the orange, or is that just the blue interacting with the orange?
Yeah, I think I have some purple in there and some red-brown in the shadows of the orange.
All right, that's great. Now her eyes, one blue, one green. Why?
I think
was
that
the-
is it's
that
not
a photo?
intentional.
Is that the photo?
I think that's the photo, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was like, that's a
that
really
way
cool
on my
idea. I
monitor.
love that idea.
But I mean, yeah, of course, I totally did that just
Yeah.
because
You
you
told-
want something new to look at every scale of looking at the figure. So you wouldn't be able to see this unless it was super zoomed in. So a savvy viewer like you will catch it,
Right.
but nobody else will.
I want
There's a
to
couple
also
of
thank
comments
you.
about the eyes. Maybe you could go quickly over your eye technique.
Oh, yeah.
My eye technique has developed over the years. And so I paint the whole eye dark, and then I paint the white of the eye in a lighter color. Here, I think it's more like a bone or a gray color. It's not the pure white. You can see, I think, the glint of the pure white on her eye is clearly lighter than the so-called white of the eye, the sclera.
The
But
highlight
then,
is.
so I don't use the pure white as the sclera because I need to give myself room to make pure white just those glints to simulate where light is reflecting off of something. So it's paint the whole thing dark, paint the sclera lighter, paint the whole iris dark, and then paint the color in the iris. So usually it's like a ring, sort of just that lower part, like a gem where the light is coming in and catching the color of the lower part of the iris. And then touching up the pupil again with black, and then dotting that highlight of white. Because she's an elf, it gives me the freedom to make her irises bigger than normal humans would be, because elves should have that kind of otherworldly, fey quality to them. And when we see, well, different people have different size irises, but within the range of human irises, we tend to associate a bigger iris with a more childlike, a more baby-like, or a cuter, or even just a weirder kind of overall facial expression.
I watched a
So,
show once about anime, Japanese anime, and the movies and the series or whatever, and it was the bigger the eye, the more likely that character is a good character. The smaller, darker the eye, the more likely that character is an evil character. I always remembered that. So when I paint, I'm thinking if it's a character that's a friendly, good character, I will paint their eyes a little bit bigger and add a little bit brighter color in there. And if they're more evil or sinister, I will make them darker. And I don't know if it always reads that way, but that was something that just always pops in my head.
and besides that, you have your own puppies to look at the puppy dog eyes.
Yes,
and the puppy dog eyes have to be friendly. If the puppy dog eyes were menacing, then well, our whole relation to puppies and dogs would be different.
No, definitely. Hey, and I want to thank Derek for allowing us to zoom this picture in as gigantic, larger than it ever intended to be. So maybe we pop out of the zoom, go back to the full figure. But yeah, just the overall composition is great. And the NMM on the NWW, the NMM and the NWW is just combining all of that together and is awesome. It's awesome. So I was thinking,
Zen Bacon mentioned the warmer highlights on her lips and her nose as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, because real people don't have green skin like this. So if I painted the whole thing green, then it somehow looks totally unnatural. but by giving it a little extra pink on the ears and the nose, the places where we people would have redder or pinker places, then that helps make her look more like a living, realistic person. So good catch.
So still red-blooded, iron-based, not copper-based.
Yep. Right. If her blood were a different color, then those areas where the capillaries were close to the surface, maybe those deep sea elves might have bluer noses and ears and lips, or green or black or whatever, some other color.
That's a lot of thought on sea elves. Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned the other aquatic familiars in the pack, and I did audition like an anglerfish and a dragonfish and a octopus and some other things, but I figured that this sea elf community is more surface, so there should be like shallower water fish with them rather than the deep fish. But if somebody wants to paint this figure with as a deep sea elf, then I'd like to see that with some different skin colors and different companion choice.
I believe that's a challenge. It's a challenge that's been at Derek.
I think there's a whole arrowhead. I think there's a whole arrowhead aspect to the motion, though, from the hair all the way to the tip of the raised nose.
Yeah, the two flow together, and you really think about in composition rules of three. You want to have maybe three things and not just two things. And if you look at this initially, there's a figure and an array. But if you think about her shell, to me, that's the third thing, and it all follows in a line, which I think is really nice. It's really strong compositionally, especially for a pre-sculpted piece in with just another bit, another familiar. If you think of it, break it down just to that, and you can have a nice, not necessarily truly diorama piece, but a vignette style piece, a very strong vignette style piece, and a strong composition with just two miniatures on a single round 1-inch base. I think it's really cool.
I think it tells a story just fine in a small area.
Yeah, I think it's great. I really love it. Justin, jump us to the basilisk, please. And what music are we listening to today? It's really good.
This is rock.
I know, this is great. This is like real. This is like legitimate. We can listen to.
Yeah, this is royalty free, but it's it's its own thing.
Oh, nice. Now, a basilisk. Is this a Reaper piece, right?
Yeah, this is another one by Julie Guthrie.
And is this a recent piece? Because I don't remember ever seeing this from you.
It is, yeah. This actual figure I used as a demonstration figure at ReaperCon a couple of years ago in my painting fur, feathers, and scales class. But for that class, I gave it a dark green and then took those highlights up to white to show how to highlight scales in a way that emphasizes that catches the volume of the shape that the scales are covering, but that also then captures the shiny, hard, shiny quality of individual scales. I had that thing lying half painted on my desk for a while, and I was going through some reference photographs that I have on my computer, and it had this one photograph of a glossy ibis, a bird whose feathers are a glossy iridescent bronze color. And I was inspired by that photograph to apply that color scheme to this basilisk. And with the Reaper Challenge League 2021, I got some points on Reaper Challenge League for a monster. I got, I think, 3 points in January or February for painting this as my monster entry for the Reaper Challenge League.
Look out, Reaper Challengers.
This is just a couple months ago.
Derek is warming up. He's up in his game in the Reaper Challenge League. And Derek sets his sights on something. You guys just, it's over. It's over. Hey, Justin, back up go to the other angle, the front angle or whatever. I know you made this base, right? And you sculpted the head and the foot, right? That's just something I know
So
that you
the
do.
foot, yeah, the foot comes from one of my the dwarf shield maidens that were part of the warlord dwarf faction. Those were some of the first figures that I sculpted for Reaper, um, almost 15 years ago now, I think. The head is one of Bobby Jackson's. It's from the Death Knight. Um, it's this big, bulky, plate armored guy that's from a Wayne Reynolds sketch. It has like skulls and bones and this halberd, and there's a choice of 3 heads that you get with the big. So this was one of the 3 head items. So I just flipped it off the head sprue.
Again,
Stuck it.
you're a master. I've always been super impressed. I like to create diorama based bases, or have, when I do a simple figure, have stuff thrown in there, Easter eggs, ideas, and a lot of that inspiration I stole from you back in the day. But
Thanks.
this is a perfect example of it's a basilisk, turn you to stone, and you emphasize that with 2 bits, and we all have a bazillion little bits laying around from various miniatures. Look at it, keep an inventory of what you have. This year coming up at ReaperCon, fingers crossed. I don't know if they're going to have the melt table or not. If they don't this year and they do next year, it's a great place to get little bits and stuff like that. I still have bits that I'll throw in that I grabbed from a ReaperCon 8 years ago or whatever, and throw it in. It adds just that much a little bit more. And again, everything's on a 1-inch base right here. It's awesome. It's all thrown in there, and you got this nice little vignette story going on. And I love how he's on the stone, he's on the rock, and you're still tying in those colors into the rock, right? Trees aren't brown, are all brown, and rocks aren't all gray. They're all different colors, and it's great to incorporate all that as well. And one other thing, and I'll let you talk since you're our main guest. The feet and the head, where the ground is underneath them, is so dark, and I like the contrast of that, because it shows off the stone pieces, which are pretty monochromatic. They're not super contrasty, but that dark helps them pop even more, which is really cool. And the dark behind them even sells it even more too. So I'm digging the music.
Yeah, this is a bones piece. So the detail isn't as crisp or sharp as it might be in a metal piece. It's sort of stuck down to its own base, and I built out the rest of the rock around it. But I wanted to get that really dark underside. It helps emphasize just the bulk and the mass of this creature. And you can see like so I had this photograph for the inspiration on the colors of the basilisk, this gold, green, purple iridescence. And then having a stone that was just gray, it would be totally out of that color scheme. So I took this idea that this basilisk is a part of its ecosystem. So it lives in an area where the rocks and where the prevailing colors are more brown and purple and green, not just gray. So the stone here should be this kind of sandy, orangey brown. But I worked in some purple through the shadows of the stone, and I got this little speckles of lichen in green on the stone. And then if this basilisk lives in this environment, maybe it turns you to the same color rocks that are in the environment naturally. So that's why I use these parts of the figure. And I wanted them to be subtle. I didn't want to dominate the whole scene with these humanoid parts, but they're sort of tucked in there.
I like how you think through the entire process and then not just, I painted this basilisk, so I want to stick them on this rock, and I was going to throw some other crap in there too. There was a whole thought process, and I think that's important that other people can hear that you thought through this. And so when they are entering pieces into a competition, this piece is, although it's a simple basilisk on a 1-inch base, right? It's well thought out and planned out, and everything, just like the Sea Chick, everything's tying in together, which is cool. And bonus points from Ron Hawkins that the eye, it's a monster, so the eye is glowing. He really likes glowing eyes in monsters. So, yeah.
Well, you squint at it,
Uh,
and I hope your emphasis goes to the head, because that eye is the lightest thing there. And
yeah,
then you can
yeah.
follow the line of the neck down, and then some of the patterns of the scales. So it brings your eye all around the piece, and you'll notice the victim parts down there, but then the grass will take you back up to it.
What do you
What'd you
think,
use
It's
for the grass, Derek?
the grass is a tuft product. It's like a winter tuft. I forget the manufacturer, but it's a pack that has a card with like 70 little prefabricated tufts of grass on it. You can peel it off and stick it down. Some of those tufts were a little too big, so I cut them into some tuftlings, some sub tufts,
Tuftlings.
and stuck them in. And then the leaf there is a piece of dried oregano that I got it in the spice rack at the grocery store.
Do you
And just
coat
picked
the
out a
do you
leaf.
coat the oregano with anything to keep it from disintegrating?
This is painted, but no varnish. So far, I guess I haven't seen whether oregano will disintegrate under normal wear conditions, but we'll keep our eyes on it.
Okay, I usually put some kind of varnish, matte varnish on it, just so it stays together. But I'm a little rougher with things too at the same time. Okay, I want to let's show Justin. Let's show Derek's workspace, please.
Say that again. Sorry.
Are you awake? Sorry if I woke you. Can we show Derek's workspace? Yeah. His desk. That was the second email. Yeah, look at that.
This is
I'm
the
glad
same
you
kind of workspace that I've had for years. Yeah.
and you used just the round plastic palette, old
Yep.
school. Yeah, that's awesome. And you're kind of in a dryish. Well, you're in the Bay Area. It's dryish, I guess, at times, or not so. But have you experimented much with a wet palette? I'm sure you have. But why not a wet palette, and why this?
I have never used a wet palette.
Oh, well,
I
see,
never
there you go.
even
I don't know.
never even tried it. So
Do you want me to send
this
you
is
one? You want to try one?
what's that?
No? You want me to send you one? I'll send you one.
I know that they exist, and I know that people say just get a sponge and some parchment paper, and it'll be great.
Right.
Um, Somehow I've been painting for 30 years now with just open jars of paint where I'd open it and just leave the lid open in front of me and paint from them.
That's good for your longevity
and
of paint right there. Yeah.
that's right. And then the paint would get all crusty, and but I switched to the dropper box. And so, but you could see I do a lot of my mixing and testing on the paper pen. And so as I finish a figure, then I have this record of the colors that I used on that figure. So some different sort of color palettes as I go through. The paint that's on my plastic palette there, it's essentially the driest mix of any given color, and I can then add water to it on my brush. And I'll test the consistency of the paint on my brush with that water by wiping it off on the paper. And some people use the thumb, some people use the palette, whatever your method is for offloading your brush. It's different from painter to painter, but this is just something that I just taught myself to use because I had the desk in my bedroom when I was learning to paint, and I didn't want to get paint spills on the desk, so I just put down a piece of white paper, and then soon I was using the white paper as a part of my painting process, and I've just kept it. So that's the way I can test when a glaze is the right consistency, when a wash is the right consistency. If I need to mix a couple colors together on my brush and just get a brush load of of one color to smooth out a blend or something.
Now, if someone tried to emulate this, I think a potential stumbling block for them is to have a consistency in their blends. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How do you overcome that, especially if you're having to paint a bigger figure where you will need your own new color combination mix?
My glib answer is that I don't worry about it so much. I don't mind.
Good.
I don't mind if the
Good.
colors just don't perfectly match from one area to another, especially on a
And why
bigger
is that?
figure, because the light that the one side of the figure is getting is going to be different from the light that another side, or the length of the clothing or part of the body is going to be different, and so I don't have a uniform color base coat, for example, on most areas of the figure. I'm usually doing a wet blend even on that very first coat of paint, so that there's already some variation built into the very first bit of paint that goes on to an area. But I do take good notes about the colors that I use, so I'll know that I had these 3, 4, 5 colors of paint on my palette, and whatever color is there on the leather glove, it must have been some mix of those 3, 4, 5 colors. Even if I don't know exactly, it was 2 drops of this to 1 drop of that.
I should have asked you for now, and I'm kicking myself now that I didn't ask you for your notes, because you say you take good notes. No, you take copious notes.
I do take copious notes.
Very detailed, and it's really, you write out everything. I think it's awesome. It's a good way. I find myself kicking myself for not doing more of that, because I'll end up with something, a color I really liked, and I've used it on 3 minis ago, and now I want to find that, go back to it, and I can find it, but it's like, did I find the exact one? And it doesn't have to be exact, but sometimes like I spend a little extra time, where if I would have taken some notes, I could have just gone to it. Justin, could you show the other palette, his close-up of his paperwork? Yeah, and there's
so
just go ahead.
Yeah, this is after I've worked on a figure for 4 sessions, so I'm left-handed, and on the bottom left corner of the paper is available for painting on, and then I'll finish that session and I'll turn it over and I'll paint the other corner, and I'll turn it and paint the other corner. And so this is we can guess. I know the top left there, those blues and purples must have come from the Frost Giant Princess. And maybe we'll see her later.
That's a teaser. Yeah.
But yeah, I take my notes on what colors I used for the various parts of my figures. So then, if I want to come back to touch it up, or I want to use that same color palette for another figure, I know what colors I used.
Totally. Well, speaking of the teas, Justin, would you throw us up the Ice Princess, please? Now, this is another piece that you sculpted.
Yes.
And fantastic sculpt. I mean, Jason, what do you think about this sculpt? This is a Wayne Reynolds art, I'm assuming.
It's a great sculpt. Obviously, it's a Wayne piece of art. I know that's always been one of my favorite sculpts that Derek's done.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah, this was
stay there on the hair. The hair is great. The transitions and the violets towards the tips on the right side are really, really nice. Really nice. Yet it's not just there. If you find, I find my eye finding it there first, but you see it, then you start looking for the violets, and it's all about. I think you do such a great job in this. You find interest, because the back of this figure, especially compared to the front, is not super interesting, sculpt-wise, right? But the paint, especially in the hair, really adds interest and keeps you like, okay, I'm gonna stick back here. And the back of the fox is great too. I mean, that's a Julie. I think it's a Julie sculpt, that little fox. I've used it. I've used it maybe 80 times, a ton of times. I love that little fox. I love that fox. It's such a great little sculpt. It's so useful. It's so fun. But yeah, throw us back
Since we're
in
talking about the hair, Michael, I
Yeah.
want to point out the difference in the weight and volume of the hair masses for anyone that's looking to sculpt some things. And you can see that the heavier parts of the hair have less motion to them. Does that make sense? So along the top, you've got those little curls because those are lighter areas, physically lighter areas. The hair is going to blow away more. I just thought I'd point that out since.
No, that's awesome. That's a great. I hadn't
well.
even thought about that. And it's good to understand that from the sculpting standpoint too, but to think of it that when you're painting too, to help emphasize that it's going to be more blowy or roundy, kind of lighter, thinner. Jessica, can you take us to the front of the piece again, please?
Yeah, some of that is sculpted, and then it's also enhanced with paint. So I didn't sculpt every single strand, but I used the paint to give that extra layer or that extra level of detail or texture to it. Because, well, it's the perennial debate as a sculptor of just how much you sculpt. And at this scale, how much is realistic to sculpt with fur and hair?
Especially off Wayne's art. It gets...
Yeah, that's right.
It's very difficult to decide what to leave in and what to leave off.
Well, yeah, right, because Wayne's art is a sketch on at least a 10 to 12 inch tall piece of paper, and it's intended to be a 2 to 3 inch figure for this, and this is a giant size, and many of his character
and there's at
designs
least a dozen layers of detail on every one of his drawings, excluding all the little rocks and bones that are hanging off it.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's always fun to try to figure out how to do that and retain the original volume of the sculpt. Thank God it was a giant.
Is this a newer piece? This is a newer piece?
This like the sea elf. This is a figure that I sculpted I think about 10 years ago, or even more.
Yeah, it's been a while.
But I started to paint her several years ago, and then somehow lost interest, but came back to her just a couple months ago. So this paint job is just a month or two old, but the figure was out in metal 10 years ago. She's also out in bones. And I was very flattered to see a few people choose her as their Reaper Challenge League trio entry. So there were some really great new interpretations of her in some color schemes that I would never imagine, but it's really great to see people's imaginations being applied to this figure.
Was the stake part of the original sculpt, or the thing that's plunged into the snow in front of her?
No, those are new, and so and even the strap on her harpoon and a few of the strands of hair are new, are custom to this figure. So she has no base whatsoever in the metal version. I don't know whether they stuck her on a base for the bones version or whether she's still baseless on that. But I built up this base with putty, and those stakes are toothpicks with some putty strands as leather straps on them. And then the snow is epoxy
the additions
glue.
To the hair. Sorry.
Yeah, you can see
the additions
on
to the hair the two off there.
Yeah, on the right side of this image, the left side of her head, there's one strand that wraps around that tusk and flies away.
Right.
That's not part of the sculpt, but I set a very fine brass wire and then covered it with some putty. When Jeremy Bonamont was a guest at ReaperCon 6 or 8 years ago, and he was part of our painting crew for that year. He was showing how he liked to add little fine details to almost all of his figures, things that would be too fine to cast. but that would
Yeah,
be
we're restricted by
realistic
technology really to
at that
do some
scale.
of that.
Yeah. So, so little strands of hair like that, and the strap on the harpoon, those are things that I added, and those help to make it look like it's a real thing at a small scale, and not just the limitations of the stick.
That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, Justin, can you zoom in on this image? Zoom in particular on her left hand and all the leather. Yeah. These are great. I like the subtle, not over the top textures on the leather, especially the brownish leathers. Those are, and it's again, you've done a great subtle way of contrasting the leathers with the skin, right? I mean, they do. That's a level of contrast we always talk about, light and dark, and you have the nice dark lining and everything in there. Yet and that reads really well. But to me, that the browns of the articles of clothing above her skin help the skin, even though it's lower depth level, pop even more and adds to the contrast level, which I think is just fantastic. It's just really cool. Even the hand pops out even more. Just for my own curiosity, we talk about browns just shouldn't be brown. I mean, what were your? Do you remember your colors in your browns for this?
I think a lot of it again was that the muted browns, driftwood brown as the light brown, and wood stain brown as the darker one. With this, because the whole thing is supposed to be cold and muted, I really had to rein in the browns that I normally use, like even earth brown, which is a pretty neutral, not very bright brown. It would have looked very like garishly orange in this color palette. I think I had some, I could get my notes. I could post them in the forum post on this later. But I had some purples that I glazed, like the middle of her skirt. You can see with those chevrons there. I think you can see that that's a deeper purpley black kind of brown.
Yeah, on the left
compared to the
on
lighter,
the viewer's
more
left.
orange straps. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No,
the straps generally are more orange or more like neutral brown, whereas the leather clothing areas are darker and purple. And then I used my freehand texturing to indicate some kind of just like the creases and the leather surface there. But I also went to some pretty bright, pretty light colored highlights there, pretty light value highlights, to show that it is leather and that it has a smooth surface that be reflecting. So it really helps.
No, and it's really
illusion.
It's a great use of a tertiary desaturated color range, with the browns, as a contrasting color.
Did you hear that?
Like that? Do you like that? That's my art.
That was tremendous. Wow, that's just stunning, Michael. Very good.
Thanks. And
then
I don't know if
even
you do
the
this.
bone parts also, you could see there's those rib bones that she has adorning her shoulders, and then she has these tusks as a necklace. And there's the white leather straps also. And so I did some judicious glazing purple into the leather and some brown and gray into the bone parts to distinguish one from another.
And the purple is unifying
on the
back with
Fox.
the skin. Right.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Is the Arctic fox possessed? Is it enchanted?
Well, she's got similar eyes.
Oh, okay.
I was imagining that it's like her familiar. She has some sort of sorceress, witchy abilities, and the fox is her companion. And the link of those glowing green, like aurora borealis green color eyes, that's the link between her and the fox.
A lot of people struggle with skulls and bones and skulls and bones and things. Like this piece is just has a ton of. What would be
Mhm.
some tips that you would talk about color-wise or in painting bones, and not just having a set formula, but what is your thought process? And like the skulls, I think are great. Everything's great on it, of course, but the bones are nice too. What would be some tips you could throw out there?
Um, Embrace the range of ivories that you have, whether
Mhm.
it's a gray to a browner to a more white. Um, and maybe make the bones, well, different a different skeleton or a different bone element on one figure will be different from something on another figure. Like if you have the skeleton is the entire figure as compared to a character that skull has a bone on it. So it'll be different for different figures. But here I tried to I've made these bones darker, but also had some popping like highlights to show that there's a shiny surface, like that these are old and like they've gotten dirty or they've sort of fossilized almost to a
Mm-hmm.
darker browner color, but there's still a
Yeah.
smooth surface to them. So it gives me the freedom to have a pretty broad range of values, a pretty high contrast, even on what we think of as bone is just light yellow or light gray color. Um, so you can go pretty dark with shadows or even a midtone on bone, and um, as long as the distribution of highlights and shadows still conveys this idea of a smooth, um, hard, smooth surface that will be reflecting light from edges and knobs and so on in the way that we would expect it to from real physics. That's a pretty roundabout response
I
of
like that answer.
what's some simple advice to give
Yeah.
people about bones. Well,
I like this what you've done on this one because they look sun bleached and
Mm.
drier. Where a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times bones that have been buried are darker with more warm brown tones to them. But these definitely
Mm.
look like they've been worn for a long time in bright light.
Yeah,
I know,
the
Jason,
leather.
you use bone a lot in carving and
I
your
do.
jewelry work, and so you're familiar with the real thing, and so um, uh, I appreciate that you think my artistic attempt to make these bones look appropriate here actually matches up with some real world
Yeah, no, it does. It
outcome
does. It really does
of
match up
bone
well.
wear.
Yeah, I want this piece. This is fantastic. You did such a fantastic job. We have to talk about
Thanks.
you relinquishing this piece to my collection at some point. I I Jason,
Seems like a
I've been
trade
talking the
maybe could
whole
be done.
time. Yeah, I'd love to do that. Jason, I've just been hogging all the questions to Derek. I didn't mean to cut you out. Is there something that
Actually,
we?
this is the kind of show I think people find very valuable because you've
Yeah.
got, two top quality painters here discussing technique in a very
Mhm.
accessible way. So I think it's perfectly appropriate that you've been hogging all the time.
This is a show that I've been kind of thinking about. We've had a number of my favorite painters on. People are my friends that I know, sculptors as well. And we've done the origin story. We've done, tell me about yourself and how you started and what was your first miniature and how you got into it. I like, not that every show is going to be like this, but I would like to get on for those painters that are brave enough to come on and let's talk about some of your proudest work or your most recent work, and
Yeah.
let's go through.
Drilling down on
Now,
technique is really
yeah,
valuable. I think that's a really good thing. And
We'll call it an
definitely,
artist deep
if we're
dive.
going to look,
right.
yeah, okay. If we're looking at techniques, when you have a chance to have Derek on the show, that's definitely something we need to exploit.
A question that I would ask if someone came up to me, and when they come up to me at ReaperCon and they ask me for a critique, I always ask them what they're most proud of. But then I will ask them, what's something of the piece that you look at now and going, God, I wish I would have done this a little bit different. Yeah, can I ask you on this piece, is there something, and it doesn't have to be, because this piece is flawlessly executed.
It's perfect.
Is there something where there's something where you look at it going, now that I see this on the screen and I've been forced to stare at it for all this time and go through it, is there something you were like, you're thinking, I might change this, or I might, does that make sense?
Yeah, I spent about 50 hours on this in the last month, and some of that was the taking a photograph, looking at the photograph, and then touching up, and then taking another photograph. So I've already been through a couple of those iterations.
Yeah. Good.
The spearhead, I'd still there are some parts of the spearhead where I'm pleased that it came out looking like this deep purplish ice, but there's some parts of it that I've still well, especially in this view where it's dark, but it's the thing that's coming forward, and I think I'd like to get a little more color variation in there. Maybe adding some more of the reds, more of overtly, or taking it more to green, something to make it visually a little bit.
What would you change about the sculpting?
Oh, about the sculpting, yeah, since it's 10 years ago. The underlying proportions, I think, for the legs and the hips are, the legs are shorter than I think I would make them now. And some of the detail of the leather work, it's not as fine as I could sculpt now, or less even or less pronounced than I could do now. I've hidden it with the paint, covered the flaws in the sculpting with the paint, and distract your attention with other areas.
I remember the art pretty well, and that's pretty close.
Yeah.
Sorry?
When you're talking about the length of the legs and stuff, that's definitely, Wayne draws a lot of his giants to look almost like big dwarves in a way.
Yeah, right. I think I would add the strap of the harpoon as part of the casting.
That looks really good.
Yeah.
And the fur cloak, it's a part of Wayne's sculpt where it's just like he sketched the outline and not the material on it. And so although I painted it, or I sculpted it and painted it so it has fur on both sides, just how do you make a fur cloak that has fur on both sides like that? I guess you take two pelts and you put them back to back.
Sure. So it's a fur-lined fur cloak.
Yeah, that's right. So there are a few areas where the sculpting wasn't as crisp as what I could do now. But
I think
like I mentioned in the forum post on this, the construction of the metal piece, I was really pleased with myself that I got it to be this two-part hollow middle sculpt. And Werner's Fire Giant Queen had just come out when I got the commission to do this piece, and Werner had sculpted that one in the same way, where there's this big hair mass and the head and the cloak, and then the body is a separate piece that fits over the front, but it's hollow in the middle, so you wind up saving like a quarter of the weight in metal, so it makes it a more affordable, more efficient piece. And so I was able to do that on this. When you buy this piece in metal, then the spear is a separate piece, but her face and the front part of her hair are one piece, and then the back of the hair on the cloak are another piece. So it fits together in that this carefully engineered, carefully designed.
Yeah, the engineering is amazing on some of these larger pieces, especially when we used to have to hollow them more often for metal production. Now
Again,
that
this
many
piece
of them are
is
vinyl, of course, they change the engineering. To
this
fit the
piece is
mold.
in bones now, but the original is in metal, and it's in the Warlord line. If anybody that's not familiar with this piece, I think this is a great one to pick up in either material. I prefer the metal material, just because it's a little bit cleaner and sharper. But the bones material is great too if you already got that via the Kickstarter. We're running a little over time.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
One question on the
yeah.
snow. How did you do the snow? Sorry.
How did I do the snow?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Lord Dave wanted to know how to do the snow.
The rocks are putty, and then the snow is epoxy glue, 5-minute epoxy, that I drizzled over the top surfaces of the rocks. And it just naturally has this viscous quality, and as long as I put it on the top surfaces of the rocks, then it sort of drips and goops over in a way that lends itself well then to painting. So that then I painted it with pale indigo and a sky blue and a little bits of green here and there, and going up to pure white. A lot of stippled texture to stimulate the flakes of snow on.
And pro tip, you did let the epoxy dry.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, just want to confirm.
But I think it was like 4 or 5 or 6 mixes of epoxy. So put a couple of drops of the 2-part 5-minute epoxy, stir it, apply it to a few surfaces, then it cures, and then I mix a new batch. So over the course of an hour or so, I had epoxy.
Perfect. All right, well, Derek, thank you so much for joining us. This has been fun. I think you've helped us find a potential new kind of format occasionally for this show, which has been fun. And I appreciate you being our guinea pig and going into that detail and breaking down your pieces and staring at, especially the sea elf, on that tight in, zoomed in focus that was never intended for anybody to ever see it that way. That's something, as you know, as a painter, you're like, oh, I don't want to see my stuff blown up that big. You know, I don't mind it a little bigger, but yeah, it's never was intended that way. So I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Derek, did you want to?
Well, you talked about doing an artist deep dive. Now, when you say that you have ADD, you're really talking about your artist deep dive.
So we got ADD.
There you go.
We got non-wet water, and with non-metal of this, of course. Something we got to figure out something on the snow. So it's non-glue snow, glue G snow, whatever. We had to come up with something epoxy snow effect. So yeah, Derek's got all kinds of classes he got coming up for ReaperCon, all new classes.
Well, I think Justin goes back through these shows and he's actually developing a whole new lexicon for the crow's nest of words that we've developed, rather than just stumbled on like we actually do. But we say they're in development.
Yeah. Well, again,
New
thank you
acronyms.
everybody for Thanks everybody for tuning in. Derek, is there anything you're working on? Anything you want to pub? New acting stuff coming out? New commercials? Whatever?
I do have some parts in some developmental readings of some scripts here in the San Francisco area, but I'm just going to keep painting. I'll be posting my stuff on the Discord in the Challenge League. I'll be posting it on the Reaper Forum. On Reaper Forum, you can look me up, DKS. And especially if you're new to the Reaper Forum, you can look up DKS and you can see stuff from years and years ago, and it'll be new to you. So there's plenty there.
Right. Well, next week we have Bryce Coconor is going to be joining us. That's going to be a little origin story, and I think we might mix in a little bit of a deep dive with Bryce. I've already asked him to send some photos. Yeah, be ready, Bryce. I think you're out there. Yeah, we wanted Derek on to set the bar extremely high so we can watch everybody stumble. And then this week, there's all the other Reaper shows. Who cares? But on Friday, Reaper Errant is coming back, and D&D with Frank from Nightheart Gaming. Best show on Twitch. We're a close second, but the best show on Twitch is is Nightheart Gaming D&D. So Friday night, check it out. It's a lot of fun. A lot of good banter from folks, and Frank runs a great D&D game. Jason, what you got? What you got for us? Did I steal everything away?
I got nothing. Nothing.
Right.
I mean, I think we're going to put up a Facebook page just for the show. We have two miniatures in development now. One, the idea that you texted me a while ago, and then the bus that we showed a little while ago. I've been talking, I think we're going to have some metal copies of that, some antique metal copies of that made, and then some resin copies. We may even do a Gaslands straight version instead of having it all curled up like the logo. So
cool.
We got a couple ideas for that.
Yeah, and we're going to be expanding our TeePublic and Zazzle stores. I had an idea. You know, these great posters. Would it be worth it to put these posters up on the Zazzle and the TeePublic to throw on T-shirts, or I'm sure Derek's been on the show. He would want to have his own T-shirt that he was on the Crow's Nest. It might be something that's kind of cool.
I wouldn't mind
been your favorite show.
I wouldn't mind them having them as posters to put in the hallway when we finish the actual studio built for people to come see.
Dude, that's a great idea. That's great.
Be like concert posters.
We're gonna do that. Yeah. You remember the time when we had the Derek Schubert experience, episode 36? That was an all-time classic.
Yeah, now this is only a small bit of the Derek Schubert experience. I mean, it's all we could cram into an hour, really, and we didn't really get to a lot of it. But we'll do that on a future deep dive.
No, we didn't have any singing. We didn't have any voices. We didn't have any.
Well,
we typed a little bit about
singing because of the DRM stuff until Derek makes his own songs, and then he can grant us permission.
I see us having an entire chain of episodes dedicated to individual artists with multiple parts based on all their work. So we should do an encyclopedic coverage of all of their work. Derek, we'll need about 48 parts for you.
Yeah.
Sure. We'll also need to flip it at some point and have somebody interview Michael as an artist rather than Michael hosting.
I agree.
That's
me too.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
A Sadie Hawkins episode, as it were.
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to invite Michael to the dance.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for that. I appreciate that. And again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Had a great time. Derek, again, thanks you so much. Looking forward to ReaperCon coming up. Hopefully everybody can make it. I got my vaccine scheduled for the first dose on Friday. Yay me.
Great.
Yeah. So we'll see how all that goes.
Fantastic.
So get out there, get vaccinated when you can. Stay healthy, and that's it. Justin, who are you rating?
We are going to be rating C-Not Bush.
Oh, by the way, best music. I've really enjoyed this show even more, not just because Derek was on, but that's some good music just to listen to. And come on, Derek.
Perfect. I'll crank this up just a hair here, and I'll send us off into our thanks for watching. Thanks, everyone. We will see you tomorrow. Keep being awesome, and thanks again.
Yeah.
Crashing's all that comes out. What's there left?